Hello, everyone. I'm here with the American fashion designer, Byron Lars. Byron, welcome to Pop Style TV.
Thank you, Tijana. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone.
It is so good to have you and to chat with you because you started as a Rookie of the Year by WWD to just last year, New York Times title, Byron is still here 30 years later. So I was wondering, how does it feel looking back at those 30 years?
I seldom look back because while fashion is about a reflection of the past and projecting that forward and carrying things forward, I think it's probably it's just more productive to keep one's gaze forward looking. You know what I mean? And because to keep things relevant. But this latest In Earnest collection started from something from like beginnings. But in general, it's about seeing where she is in this moment, where kind of projecting where she might be moving, and she being our girl, our customer, and what things like she needs to fit in her closet and her life to keep crushing it.
What are some of the signature elements of your style that you're always going to keep and that you don't compromise on?
American sportswear. It's funny because it's always referred to as having a European sensibility, and I never really see it that way because the roots of American sportswear was about invention and innovation and pragmatism. You know what I mean? And I think that's something that I always try and imbue in all the clothes. It's just making it interesting and beautiful and functional. But of course it's amplified with in this case, bra cups and all that stuff. The white collar and cuff are removable, speaking back to the pragmatism of American sportswear. So, white collar and cuff is very susceptible to soiling.
So you formed your own label in 1991. How did it work back then? How do you get in front of the right people?
Oddly enough, it was certainly harder in terms of the physical labor that it took to get in front of people. I mean, we didn't have Zoom. We didn't have a cell phone. There's none of that stuff.
No Instagram either, no social media. You couldn't inbox anybody.
I mean, if you want that message out there, you have to put it in a bag and put it on your back and get into an office and get in front of someone. That is if they had time to see you. Now, of course, no one has time to see you when they don't know who you are. So a lot of it is probably going against all your good breeding and getting a little rude and hey, I'm here. I'm here. So there were some of those, for instance, my first order came from Henry Bendel, and they had a luxury department store that no longer exists. It was amazing. That's where Stephen Burrows had Stephen Burrows' world. I mean, they were very pivotal in his, meteoric rise to fame in this industry. And they just had a kind of a legacy of supporting new talent. So knowing all that, they were my first stop with the bag over my back.
How many pieces would you usually show?
There were 8 pieces, and it was a really tight group of baseball jacket kind of inspired dresses. And oddly enough, this is one thing that nobody really connects with, that Rookie of the Year title. That is why they chose that language, because of those baseball dresses at Bendel's. It was okay, I don't get it, but that was why they used language, because of all that. At the time, there was a big recession going on at that time. And a lot of the larger brands, of course, when there's a recession and money gets tight, things get very safe looking. Do you know what I mean? People, businesses don't feel like that they have the latitude to exercise flights of fancy. So that's when this whole category at the time, young designer, came on the scene, and people like myself and Todd Oldham and Anna Sui, who was relatively new then, really had an opportunity to be recognized in a serious way because we had something to offer that looked different, and it wasn't entirely safe. It was just fun and what we felt. And the market responded to it and did ironically take us serious. That first group of baseball dresses that had delivered to Bendel's got Fifth Avenue windows. Of course, I didn't know until I was walking by.
Really? Tell me about that moment. Tell me about the moment when you saw your
I was
dresses in the
just
window.
blown away. I'm like walking by with another garment bag on my back, by the way, because after I got that order, that was probably about all I could afford to fulfill at the time. And then I thought, okay, well, the next stop is the magazines. And so I started slinging that bag over my back and made some new samples and had those samples, in fact, in there, which was great to say, like, hey, by the way, these things are in Bendo's window right now. So that kind of helped, build some kind of like momentum or legitimacy for this guy who came out of nowhere, who's at your desk side now showing you stuff.
So before you made a name for yourself, were you inspired by any other designers, models, architects, figures we would be familiar with?
Well, I did want to plan to be an architect all while I was in high school until I learned to sew. So that was something that, I felt like incredibly sketchy when I decided to turn to fashion. And then until you learn so many designers had an interest in architecture, not the least of which being Cristobal Balenciaga. I'm like, once I learned that, I'm like, oh, okay, then this is perfectly okay. When I was in high school and still making prom dresses and all that stuff. And, I go around to the high-end department stores. At that time, there was one I Magnet that exists. And in every one of those stores, there's always a very chic, an older Black lady in the department. I don't know why, but there always is. And there was one in I Magnet, and her name was Bunky. And she came up to me. I guess she was like, well, I see this guy in the women's, couture department. And I'm like, what's his deal? So she came to me and I told her that, like, hey, I wanted to be a fashion designer and all this stuff. And she beckoned me forward. She had just gotten in some new Valentino. And that was when shoulder pads were all the rage. And she showed me, and it was a problem because, you had a shoulder pad sweater with a shoulder pad coat with a shoulder fit. By the time it was all said and done, everybody had no neck whatsoever. But Mr. Valentino had these graded shoulder pads that were stackable on one another. So that when you had all those layers together, you didn't lose your neck. You just looked very structured and chic. And when the underlayers weren't under there was some excess fabric, but it was all managed masterfully and thought about. And that was when I learned, I'm like, oh, the big boys are figuring out all these problems. It was really a great moment in my education of fashion. It was before I even went to fashion school. But that was the first really important lesson that, like, you've got to solve all the problems before they become problems. That's really what design is, problem solving. So that was really amazing. So yes, Mr. Valentino was one, Claude Montana, of course, the great Terry Mugler, because they just had all these amazing, and I dare say, architectural moments in fashion. So, really did bridge those two interests in a very obvious way. I was always drawn to like the pattern making and the building of the clothes. So that's where the synergy in fashion and architecture came from, and remains to this day.
Yeah, amazing. So how was it designing for someone like Barbie? What were the challenges for Barbie dresses?
Oh, Barbie's my girl, and definitely by far my most famous client. You know, I didn't realize how important those dolls were to particularly Black women who looked like many of those dolls who had never seen themselves in Barbie. You know, like for instance, one of my proudest moments was actually pushing the envelope to the point of them making the darkest shade Barbie that they had ever made to that point. And it took some time. You know, it took some successes to even build up to that level of trust in Mattel management to even allow it to happen. And when it did, it was wildly successful and very, I mean, more important than I realized, because, you know, I was just kind of on the surface here. I'm like, hey, she'll be fabulous. You know, there's Elec Weck, who is that color? You know, it was pretty surface until I started meeting women out there with tears in their eyes thanking me for it. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so much bigger than my little idea of it. And, you know, and I'm really thankful to have been a part of that. Since then, they make that color Barbie all the time. So, you know, you just need that door to be open.
You faced quite a lot of ups and downs. What are your thoughts on it? How did you always manage to get back up?
Michael Jordan said that like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. You know, I guess there's like kind of like really internalizing that and knowing that like to, you know, I don't think fashion design is just like what I do. It's kind of who I am. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I think I'd be doing this because I always like fantasize about like, well, if I hit that like $300 million lotto ticket, I'm out. And then my business partner is always like, yeah, like, no, you're not out. And then I think I'm like, yeah, you're right. But it's so I think that's why you just keep getting up when you get knocked down. And then you hear everybody else's story. And you start seeing those documentaries about unsung and people in all kinds of industries and documenting moments that you might remember in their histories where you're like, wow, they're at the pinnacle of success. And then you realize, wow, they were just scraping by at that moment, or ultimate tragedy had, you know, they were overcoming something so much bigger than that moment that was, you know, publicly visible. And then you just realize that's just what life is. It's just a whole mixed bag of stuff. And you got to just keep moving forward. I mean, it's just nobody really escapes that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is it. I just want to keep telling our story about being there in it with her and for her.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Byron, and see you on the runway.
Thank you. See you on the runway.